Sometimes, to save everything, you have to put the most precious thing on the line. One corporate departure, one night, one secret that suddenly turns the perfect American dream into a nightmare. He came to find the truth, but what he discovered destroyed his world forever. The trust was betrayed. But what happens next? The whole evening was filled with lively laughter and entertaining stories from the bulky oak table. A close-knit group of people gathered in the spacious dining room of an old country estate. Elizabeth took a seat next to James and her husband, with whom they were a little late for the meal. Scott, the new employee of the corporation, was sitting directly in front of them. Formally, this event was an off-site corporate meeting of the company where Elizabeth worked, and under other conditions, it would have been different. The next day, after relaxing in nature, all participants had to return to the city. James knew that his wife was an attractive and successful woman. They had a great career, two wonderful sons, 15 and 16 years old, and their lives seemed to be going on as usual, full of well-being. However, Elizabeth had been somewhat sullen for the past few weeks, as if something was bothering her. He tried to talk to her, but to no avail. She informed him about the departure only the day before the trip. James, without hesitation, agreed and arranged everything so that the sons could stay with Elizabeth's parents, who live outside the city in the suburbs. Nevertheless, the man felt that his wife was not particularly pleased with his presence, although she did not say anything out loud. It was in the minivan that James saw Scott for the first time, having previously crossed paths with him only at annual holiday receptions, where he always remained inconspicuous. Upon arrival, everyone checked into their rooms, and soon Elizabeth went outside. James slowed his pace a little and followed her. He found her on the outdoor terrace, chatting animatedly with a young colleague and nodding back with a smile. James was alarmed, sensing an unpleasant omen. At that moment, a young female employee stopped next to him. "Are they having an affair?" James asked quietly, referring to Elizabeth and Scott. "No, there is no full-fledged novel yet, but Shakespearean passions are boiling, although both are not free. Everything is still at the correspondence level. Well, he can be understood. The approval of his reports depends on her, which she constantly corrects," the employee replied, smiling slightly. "And who is his wife?" "Lauren. She works for another company. I've seen her a couple of times. She's a charming woman." "Well, okay, I have to go. My husband is expecting," she added with a light laugh. "And who are you?" "Caitlin, but I'm married." "Nice to meet you." "I'm James, and I'm not free either," he said stiffly, hiding his inner tension. After receiving this information, James realized what this trip could have led to if he hadn't come with Elizabeth. From that moment on, he did not leave his wife's side, despite her and Scott's obvious displeasure. And so, at the gala dinner, conversations were heard, but the tension in the atmosphere was palpable. Elizabeth, looking at the abundance of alcoholic beverages, offered with a smile. "James, you can drink as much as you want today until you lose your mind. I'm not limiting you. But forget about it at home." "With pleasure, dear. I'll drink all I can," James replied with a touch of irony. However, despite her playful tone, James couldn't help but notice the hidden meaning. Elizabeth's decision was clearly an attempt to distract him, perhaps so that she could take advantage of his vulnerable state. According to Scott, he knew that he was staying on the third floor in room 315. James watched as Elizabeth and Scott started discussing official business at the same table. Taking advantage of the moment, he decided to join the conversation, as he was well acquainted with the situation. He and Elizabeth graduated from the same university. Scott, according to him, also studied there, but much later. James, after asking a few leading questions about the teachers, understood in just a couple of minutes. Scott had never attended this educational institution. Although James had graduated a long time ago, he kept in touch with his alma mater and knew all the current and former professors. His suspicions only intensified. Meanwhile, the music started playing, and the heated merriment reached its peak. Suddenly, Scott went to the audio system, carefully examined it during installation, rearranged something there, and swapped the wires. The music stopped, and after about an hour, the guests began to go to their rooms. Elizabeth turned to her husband with a slight sneer. "I'll walk you to your room. I can see that you won't make it on your own." "Elizabeth, I'll help you," Scott suggested, standing up. But James replied in a completely sober voice. "You don't need to accompany me. I'm not drunk at all." "Are you sure you can walk by yourself?" Elizabeth asked doubtfully. "Of course. Do you think I need to be carried?" he retorted with a grin. "I'm completely sober." "It's amazing, but you've had so much to drink." Elizabeth shook her head. They sat for a while longer at the almost empty table. Scott retired to his room. James and Elizabeth also went to their room. They went straight to bed when they got back, but James couldn't sleep. As soon as Elizabeth quietly got up, put on a housecoat, and headed for the exit, he asked, "Where are you going?" "Are you awake?" "I can't sleep," he replied. "I can't sleep either." "I want to get some fresh air," she said, sitting on the edge of the bed. James put on a tracksuit and followed his wife. They went out onto the porch together. Scott was sitting on a wooden bench, smoking. When he saw Elizabeth, he perked up, but his joy quickly subsided when James appeared next. "Can't you sleep either, Scott?" "What is it?" he asked calmly. "Yes, I decided to smoke a cigarette before going to bed, relax," he muttered, slightly embarrassed. "Smoking is bad, you know," James said with a cold smile. "I know, but I don't smoke often, and the cigarettes are good." "Good ones?" "I'm not sure if there are such things. All of them are harmful, slowly but surely killing the body. By the way, why didn't you take Lauren with you?" James suddenly changed the subject. "Lauren?" Scott asked, slightly raising his eyebrows. "Well, yes, your wife," James continued with a smile. "She would definitely like it here." It was clear from Elizabeth's reaction that she didn't know Scott had a wife. However, James did not stop and continued. "After all, many people came here with children. We should have taken our own, but we sent them to their grandparents. Where are you going with your people?" "He and my wife and her parents went to the coast for a week. Long vacation," Scott replied with some tension. "I see. Okay, I'm done smoking. I'm going to bed." "Good night." Scott quickly concluded the conversation, clearly not wanting to delve into the topic. James and Elizabeth stood in silence for a while longer and then returned to the room. The woman fell into a deep sleep, lulled by the cool night air. She woke up to James gently stroking her hair. "What are you doing?" the woman whispered in her sleep. "Many people have already woken up and gone for a walk. Breakfast is coming soon. It's time to get up," he replied with a soft smile. "Are you ready yet?" "What is it?" she asked, stretching. "Yes, as you can see. I've already taken a shower and packed up. We're going home today." The time before departure flew by unnoticed. James was by Elizabeth's side the whole time, as if unwilling to let her out of his sight. Finally, everyone boarded the bus and headed back to the city. As the bus passed Elizabeth's parents' house, where their children were staying with their grandparents, Caitlin, who was sitting in front with her husband, looked at James and bit her lip, realizing to whom she had leaked the rumors about Elizabeth and Scott's rapprochement. Their family SUV with increased ground clearance was parked in the yard, ready for any conditions. After warm hugs with their parents and short stories about their vacation, they got into the car and headed home. At home, Elizabeth began to cook dinner, and James and the children took up their small design projects, enthusiastically absorbed in working together. Soon Elizabeth called everyone to the table, reminding them to wash their hands first. At dinner, the eldest son, Jacob, enthusiastically told, "This morning, when the others were still asleep, Grandma went to the farmer's market and brought fresh mushrooms. She fried them and said that there are a lot of mushrooms in the area now." And you ate them? Asked Elizabeth. Well, yes, it was very tasty, but what? James, I need to call my mom and forbid her to give mushrooms to children. It's dangerous. Come on, they're not babies anymore. It's not a big deal. Dad, are we going to the suburbs to pick mushrooms for your mom? Why not? It's only 7:30 p.m. If we get ready quickly, we'll be in the suburbs by 10:30, and we'll go to the woods early in the morning. James, you have work tomorrow, Elizabeth reminded him. I remember, but I've got 3 days off. He dialed the number of his supervisor on the hotline, with whom he had a friendly relationship. The issue was resolved within a few minutes. Jacob, William, get ready. We're going to visit Grandma in the suburbs for 3 days. Do you know what to take with you? Should I take fishing rods? Junior asked enthusiastically. Of course, take it, James replied with a smile. You know what you need. The children happily rushed to their room to start packing. James, thoughtfully picking at his salad with a fork, suddenly looked up and said, Elizabeth, I'm not a child, and I understand perfectly well. You like Scott, and on this trip I was like an uninvited guest for you. Everything you planned failed because of me. Elizabeth was taken aback by these words, but quickly pulled herself together. James, are you serious? Are you jealous of Scott? This is complete nonsense. Why do you have such thoughts at all? Don't say anything, Elizabeth, James interrupted her in a calm but cold tone. You'll regret your words later. I don't even need you to confirm it. For me, this is an axiom. I know that because of my presence, nothing worked out between you and him, but I'm not going to be your supervisor. My trust is lost. How could you think that? What's gotten into you? Elizabeth stared at him with wide eyes. Nothing was found. I understood everything at the field meeting. The kids and I will be back in a week, and what happens next depends on you. I need to believe in your sincerity. James, what proof do you have? What are these accusations based on? Elizabeth, the evidence is important to you, not to me. You have to decide if we need each other or if Scott is more important to you. I haven't made a final decision yet, but I'm still digesting the disrespect you showed at the meeting. You'll find out the final conclusion when I bring the children back. And one more thing. If your fan shows up in this apartment during my absence, I will not let it go without consequences. At that moment, Jacob burst into the kitchen, happily announcing, We are ready for the trip. James calmly put down his fork, got up, and silently went into the room. He quickly collected his documents, tracksuit and slippers, and left the apartment in silence without saying a word goodbye. Elizabeth was left alone in an empty apartment. She knew James was right. This whole trip idea was just for the sake of being with Scott. She sincerely hoped that James would refuse to go, because he had always disliked such corporate events, considered them a waste of time, and even harmful to the team. Scott was a pleasant conversationalist, and from the moment he arrived at the office, they developed a friendly understanding. They often discussed work issues, and Scott knew how to make Elizabeth smile with his jokes. Although, as she later realized, he sometimes lacked professional knowledge, and he confused elementary concepts. Now James had given her an ultimatum, but she couldn't even imagine her life without him. Elizabeth understood that James had no evidence of her infidelity, but she was also clearly aware that he did not need them. How to get out of this difficult situation now? She didn't need Scott. There was nothing serious in her plans at their retreat, except for a light hug or a fleeting kiss. But when she arrived at the place, she found out that Scott had arranged a separate room for himself. It was a clear hint, and she was relieved that everything had gone wrong. Elizabeth knew that their women's team always noticed everything, and she didn't want the situation to get out of control. After James left with the children, she stayed at home alone. I washed the dishes, put things in order, and standing in front of the mirror, I thought about my marriage. She couldn't lose James. If there was even the slightest chance to save their relationship, Elizabeth was going to take it. Meanwhile, James and the children grabbed buckets and wicker baskets and loaded everything into the crossover. James' father, Walter, went with them. Soon they reached the countryside, where vast, untouched forests awaited them, and the boys enthusiastically explored the forest trails. This village, where James' parents lived, was like a second home for them, and they often came here. The local forests were pleased with the rich harvest of mushrooms, which Walter immediately noted. Have a good year on mushrooms. The places here are such that urban people don't get here. Why don't they know the way? Jacob asked. They know the way, but they're afraid of snakes. There are a lot of them, he winked at his son. She'll look like a rattlesnake if she's scared. Although, admittedly, rattlesnakes are also found here, out there, basking in the sun. When Jacob and William saw the snake, they eagerly rushed to it. Where are you going? Walter shouted sternly. Catching a snake, or what? Yes, we'll take her home to the city. Well, remember what I taught you? You can't touch snakes, hedgehogs, or hurt deer or cougars in the forest, the boys answered in unison. That's right, but do you really think you can handle a cougar or a deer? Well, that's wrong. We can't hurt them, Jacob protested. Does the fact that a rattlesnake bite is fatal mean anything to you? Can we at least catch a snake? No, we're not going to catch anyone. Just look at the rattlesnake, but don't get too close. While they were discussing the snake, sensing danger, disappeared into the undergrowth. We got home without incident. Mary Ann Smith, seeing the harvest, exclaimed, "Oh, how many mushrooms! I have to clean them until morning." Mom, don't worry. We will help. We'll all sit in the yard and clean it, James assured her. And indeed, the whole family, along with Mary Ann's neighbors, who came to see the unusual harvest, set to work. The mushrooms were sorted, some of them decided to dry, and the best ones were marinated. By 5 p.m., despite the hassle, the whole family managed to have lunch in turn, turning the process into a warm and friendly activity. Around 7 p.m., Mary Ann was still busy with mushrooms in the kitchen. Outside, about 10 minutes after the arrival of the last bus from the city, the gate slammed, and Elizabeth, James' wife, entered the house. She greeted me warmly and asked, "Where's James? Where are the boys?" "They went to the club," Mary Ann replied, wiping her hands on her apron. "I thought they were going to bed, but then our club manager showed up, found out that James had arrived, and asked to see their equipment. As he said, it was bought back in the 80s, or even in the Stone Age. Previously, when James lived here before studying, he was constantly repairing it. And then the manager's niece came to visit, so soon I'll go to them too. You need to relax. Go." When Elizabeth arrived at the community center, music was playing loudly. Obviously, James had already fixed everything. She went inside and headed to the dance hall. Young guys and several adults gathered inside. Couples were slowly spinning on the dance floor, and James was among them, along with a woman he knew. In front of her was a slender, petite brunette in a sports top and tight jeans. James was wearing an old, worn-out shirt that had been taken to the village a long time ago, but he still looked impressive in it. They were the most beautiful couple in the room. Elizabeth felt anger and jealousy boiling up inside her, but she didn't show anything outwardly. At that moment, James noticed her, but didn't show it. Elizabeth's sons ran up to her, joyfully calling her to dance, but she refused, unable to find the strength. The music stopped. James bowed to his partner and went to the control panel to turn it off. The evening came to an end. The head of the community center announced, "The dancing is over. We'll meet next Wednesday. Be sure to come." "I will," James replied. James walked over to Elizabeth, where their sons were standing, excitedly telling her how they had chased the snake in the morning. He greeted his wife. "Hello. What happened?" Elizabeth looked at him with a pang of bitterness. "No, nothing. It's just that I came to my husband's house, and he's already met someone here and is dancing. Elizabeth, James replied with a frown. I danced with Aubrey. We went to the same high school. This is my countrywoman. But you looked very nice together. I don't know how it looked from the outside, but I take my wedding vows seriously and have always kept them. There wasn't even a hint of flirting. I would never do what you did. But on Friday, I will receive answers to all my questions and consider myself free from these vows. James, Elizabeth said excitedly, feeling the ground give way under her feet. I didn't have anything with Scott. If there was anything more between you and me, we wouldn't be talking right now, James began calmly, but there was bitterness in his voice. You betrayed me, and he is faithful to his wife. The children will come back from vacation, and he will have a happy life. And you'll be left sitting on the ruins of our marriage, waiting for him to show up. Can I say something? Elizabeth tried. Yes, but not right now, James replied, interrupting her. And only if you tell the truth. I'll immediately feel the lies and falsehoods, but I don't need that. Besides, we're already home. We'll talk after dinner. I haven't said anything to my parents or children yet. They had dinner in the usual silence. After the children went to their room and fell asleep, Mary Ann started cleaning the kitchen. Elizabeth helped her, trying to look calm. Walter was already fast asleep by then. When everything was cleaned up, James' mother wished everyone good night and went to her room. Elizabeth and James were left alone in the kitchen. So, what did you want to say? I don't want to wait for Friday, she replied softly. What about your job? His voice was cold and distant. I took time off, and then a vacation. She was going to resign at the end of her vacation. Elizabeth looked into his eyes, trying not to look away. But first things first. I won't hide it. I really liked Scott. He flirted unobtrusively and beautifully, and I got carried away with him. Yes, I noticed that his professional knowledge is not perfect, and when you talked to him at the table, I realized that he did not study at our university. Moreover, he hid from me that he has a wife and children. But it's not that important. The main thing is that after you left, I saw my life from the outside and realized that I had made a huge mistake. I realized how much I love you, that I can't lose you. I want to spend my life with you and I want to grow old with you. She was silent for a moment, trying to collect her thoughts. I do not know how true this sounds, but it is the pure truth. What I did was stupid and wrong, and there's no excuse for it. But I sincerely want to fix everything, and I'm ready to do anything you say. I've learned my lesson. Please give me a chance to save our family. I will do my best to restore your trust, I promise. You'll never regret it. Did you plan anything during that trip to the field meeting? James asked. His voice was strained but restrained. No, our relationship didn't go that far. If it wasn't for you and your presence at the meeting, things could have gone far. I think your presence was a deterrent to him too, although he was unhappy, of course. Elizabeth sighed as she looked at him. I disappointed him even more today. I haven't signed any papers because everything needs to be redone. I wasn't going to do this. I wrote a memo and handed it over to the CEO along with applications for time off, vacation, and dismissal. Everything was signed, except for the dismissal. The general called me, asked me what happened, and said he would check where this guy studied, since he didn't know the basic things. On the way here, Caitlin's employee called me and informed me that Scott had dropped his letter of resignation and left without waiting for the payment. All his cases were handed over to her. Has he tried to contact you? I tried. He called several times, but I didn't answer. We have nothing to talk about, and I'm here because I decided not to wait for you to come home to confess everything. Everything is in your hands now. Tell me in the morning what you've decided. James was silent for a long time, as if considering her words. Then he said calmly, In the morning I go fishing with the kids. I promised them. You can come with us if you want. And now it's too late. Let's go to bed. As time passed, Elizabeth and James managed to save their marriage. Although this path was not easy, James didn't immediately believe her words, but he no longer had any complaints about her behavior. In turn, Elizabeth has never forgotten the scene where her husband, strong and handsome, dances with an exquisite, petite woman to loud music. This scene remained in her memory forever, reminding her of how easy it is to lose everything. As for Scott, he disappeared after he was fired. His fate remained unknown for a long time. Over time, it became known that his wife had filed a wanted list, and a year and a half later, she divorced him. Scott was declared missing by the court. It also turned out that he had never studied at the university, but for some time worked as a loader in a warehouse.